Hey everyone, and welcome to another Risky Business product demo. My name's Patrick Gray. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Prowler. So Prowler is a cloud security platform that allows you to connect into your various, cloud instances and perform various checks. You can do this by command line. You can do this through a, nice, pretty, pointy-clicky web interface. And Prowler is based on an open source project that is extremely popular. And joining me now is Prowler's founder or co-founder, Toni de la Fuente, who's joining us from Spain. And he's going to be walking us through the whole thing. That was a very light touch description of what Prowler is. How do you best describe what Prowler actually is?
Yeah, so Prowler is an open source platform that allows you to have your cloud security under control. We have thousands of checks or security controls, and we go through AWS, Azure, GCP or Kubernetes and others coming to assess the security of those platforms.
Yeah. Now, I did mention that it's an open source project and a very, very popular one. It is insanely popular, the open source version of this.
Yeah. The whole platform is open source, and we have more than 10 million downloads, and now we have passed 11,000 stars on GitHub. Yes, and the community is growing every day. Yeah.
So why don't you tell us about the, what people would get with the commercial version of Prowler? Because I'm guessing some people watching this would already be familiar with the open source platform. So what's the extra sauce you're going to get with the commercial versions?
Prowler is, as I said, is the whole platform. So you can use it on-prem by yourself, either in the web UI with the persistent storage, let's say with the database, and the UI with the reports and the CLI. But at the same time, if you don't want to run it by yourself, you can go to cloud.prowler.com and use it there. So you pay for the hosted version of your lovely Prowler.
So it's essentially just that you can get it as a service, right? So it's the same thing. It's exactly the same as open source, but instead you can just go and pay, and you don't have to worry about spinning up container images and configuring it and getting it working and messing around with certificates and all of that stuff.
Updates, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's just
by default. So it makes it very easy.
All right. So why don't you walk us through the common use cases for the platform? That seems a good place to start.
There are two main use cases with Prowler, and when it comes to assessing AWS or GCP or Azure, right? Which is the first time that you need to know what's going on in your cloud because you have no idea what's happening in the different services in different regions, or even for Kubernetes in all your namespaces, clusters, etc. So what you can do is to go to Prowler, cloud.prowler.com, or download Prowler and create an account. Once you have that account created, the first thing that you have to do is, of course, add a provider. In this demo session, I already have some providers added for the sake of the demo, right? I don't want to be adding everything to scan. So you can go to cloud providers and you can see all the providers that you have, but at the same time, you can add your own. So let's say that you have a new AWS account, so you can add it here, add an alias for the account. Let me do some example here. For example, right, an alias demo, and you can connect either assuming an IAM role, of course, with a unique external ID for security, and of course the role that you are going to assume in your account, right? But also, if you are for just one-time assessment, you have temporary credentials, you can do that as well. And this is valid for any provider or cloud provider that you have to assess. With that, I'm going to close it. So you can have multiple providers and as many accounts, clusters, subscriptions, and projects that you want. Once that is done, you can go ahead and see the results. For example, these are the result, all the findings for the jobs or the assessments for Kubernetes, and you can see the findings. In this case, we see all the findings by we can sort them by severity. In this case, we can see only critical, for example, non-critical, high. So we can see all the high. Okay, you have to minimize wildcard use in roles. This is a good practice. So we have to follow all the good practice based on services, based on regions. In this case, regions are namespaces.
I mean, it would probably make sense to explain too that what's happening here is you've got a whole bunch of pre-built checks, right? So you set up those creds, you tell it to go, and it's got a whole bunch of pre-canned queries, something like, what is it, like 400, I think, out of the box?
So we have out of the box for all providers more than 1,000. Yes.
Okay, more than 1,000 now, right? So you've been busy, and the idea is those pre-canned checks just get run against each of your, cloud tech providers, and it can bring back a whole bunch of really useful information. That information can be details on what misconfigurations, on things like, like an open S3 bucket, like SSH exposed to the internet, like all sorts of stuff, right? But like, what are the most alarming findings that tend to pop up early and get actioned first?
Yeah, so we do that based on severity. And that is how, for example, if you come here to cloud misconfigurations, it's going to mix everything that is failing sorted by severity. So if you see here, the most important thing that you have to take into account or start working on is, you have an instance with the port 22 open to the internet, right? So like this. Here we can see all the alerts, the instance, where is the account that is exposing, the name of the instance, and all the information related to this assessment, right? Of course, a link to the official documentation, and in some cases we can also show, for example, the command to fix it. For example, this is you have to make sure a Kubernetes cluster is not publicly accessible. We explain all the related details like risk, description, but also we can give you the command line in order to go straight and fix it. Okay.
Yeah.
We do that for all the findings of the findings that are basically a check that you run that we run for you, and that generates the finding with all the information that you need to follow. And of course, you can filter by severity, by different regions, by different services. If you want to know, okay, give me only AKS related checks or related findings. Okay, I have this one. And this one, again, I can go through all the details. If I want to tell another team, hey, you have to fix this because ABC, right? And you can also help them if there is any CLI command to fix it straight away. In other cases, we can give them the Terraform snippet to fix it with Terraform or with CloudFormation. It depends on the service. It depends on the finding.
Yep. So that remediation advice is just always going to be there.
Yeah. And it's a remediation advice that we write for every single check that we generate. Okay.
Yeah. You mentioned that you do have 1,000 of them in there, but you can actually create your own custom checks with Prowler as well.
Exactly. You can create your custom checks with Prowler. A check in Prowler is a metadata JSON file plus small Python code. Nothing very fancy or something that you have to learn actually. Also, we have a tool called Prowler Studio that allows you to create checks from hours to minutes.
Yeah. Do you want to show us what it looks like when you create a check in Prowler?
When you create a check in Prowler, I can show you in the repo. You can go to the repo. Everybody has access to this. You can also have your private checks. Okay. So if you come here to providers, you can see all the providers supported. See, a new provider is coming up. Like, let's see, AWS, services. Let's see, for example, AC2 list of checks. See, okay, we have a check that looks for public AMIs. In this case, we have a metadata file that is all the information that we know previously about what we want to do, right? In terms of the severity, the service, and everything related to the check. And in some cases, we also have the CLI, as you can see, or even the Terraform or the step-by-step process to fix it.
Yeah.
Categories, etc. That check also always comes with the code that is actually pulling the information from the, in this case, AWS API, and see if that is configured well or not. And additionally, we have in Prowler remediations. So if you can create any file inside the check folder with the name underscore fixer, and you can fix, Prowler can run it for you to fix whatever is failing.
Automatic remediation can be, you can tie that to certain checks, right? But I mean, that one substantial thing that changes though is at that point you're not using a read-only IAM role, right? Like in AWS. At that point,
Exactly.
You're kind of like, I can't imagine everybody wants Prowler going out there and running commands, privileged commands in there.
Exactly. So that is why in the code here, as you can see, we said, hey, this, if you want to run this, you need these permissions. Otherwise, this fixer, this remediation is not going to work, because Prowler out of the box doesn't change anything, right?
Yeah. And are people really using the auto remediation with the cloud service? Because I'd imagine they'd be more likely to use that in an instance that they're running themselves, right? Rather than putting privileged credentials into a SaaS service.
Yeah.
Which I know a lot of people just, they won't do it,
Exactly. This is why it's important to highlight the whole Prowler platform, not just the UI, but if you are using your own CLI, Prowler CLI, you can run this by yourself, right?
Yeah.
You can create, as you can see here. So you can run your own assessments for exactly the same environments that you are assessing from Prowler Cloud, but at the same time, if you are in a rush or under an auditory, you can fix stuff straight away.
Yeah.
But also, this is very helpful if you have any data restriction like ISO or air-gapped resource regions, like the ISO or
I mean,
cloud regions.
We should probably clarify that, yes, that's what we're looking at there. That delicious ASCII is Prowler's command line interface. And as you're pointing
Prowler
out,
CLI. Exactly.
Yeah, and as you're pointing out, you can run that offline if you need to. I mean, into a private cloud or whatever. I'm guessing though that if I'm a Prowler user, I might use the SaaS to just gather information on what checks I'm failing. Then I might load up some remediations into the CLI and do it that way. Are people kind of doing it that way? They split the use between, it's not like they use one or the other, they use both?
Yeah, they can use both for the remediations, because you can create also custom remediations based on your use case. Your one-time assessments or continuous monitoring from Prowler Cloud, but when it comes to specifics like while doing the hardening and while doing even some pen testing activities or point-in-time assessments, you can use the CLI as well, exactly the same, and generate the different files, for example, the JSON file, CSV, or HTML. And this is also very helpful when it comes to CI/CD pipeline integrations. So you can call Prowler directly once you deploy your test code for Terraform code.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking that. Yeah, you deploy your Terraform and then you run Prowler just to make sure nothing's gone crazy there and it doesn't light up all in red, which is something that happens, right? Like, frankly, a little bit too often.
Yeah. So that is why you can run Prowler if the exit code is different than the expected. You can tear down all the infrastructure and fix it or do something else, right? So it's very helpful for your workload and your workflow when it comes to deploying infrastructure.
I'd ask you to demonstrate it running a fix, but it's going to be really boring because it's just going to be you hitting a button and it's saying fixed.
Yeah, well, it's going to be just adding, for example, Prowler AWS that does check. Let's say EC2 underscore public AMI does that fixer. That's all. If it finds something that is failing, it fixes.
Yeah.
That's all.
What does it look like? I'm curious though. So like one of the key findings, right? You showed us some of those criticals, which is SSH open to everyone, right? Which for some people, that's not even going to be a critical finding. They'll be like, we use key-based auth, like it's fine. But you know, say you did want to auto remediate that. What does that look like? What, it just shuts off your SSH? Like that's not
Yeah,
good. Then you can't use it.
That is very important point, Patrick, because fixing stuff in runtime is not always what you have to do, right? Because that is like fishing instead of learning how to fish, right?
Yes.
So what we do this way of fixing in runtime when you are under a rush is something really hard or important, high severity stuff. But when it comes to doing a proper fixing, you have to do that in your infrastructure as code, right?
Yes.
And then redeploy. But in any case, it helps when you have to do something urgent. Let's say that you have a SOC 2 Type 2 certification audit tomorrow, and you find 50 AMIs public for whatever reason. So you can fix that straight away.
Yeah.
Right?
What sort of organizations are using this? I imagine it runs the full gamut of like anyone who's doing anything in the cloud.
Yeah, it depends. Of course, if your organization is doing a lot of ClickOps, of course, fixing in runtime is going to be your thing. But you have to prevent doing ClickOps, right? Because ClickOps is not very secure. It's not a good practice. So something else that you can do from the CLI and also take advantage of the UI is running local dashboards. So remember, if you are assessing an air-gapped environments, Gov environments, etc., you can do Prowler dashboard. And this is loading all the CSV files that after our assessments. Let's say that we are assessing all the stuff that we have, and we can open locally everything that we have there. So if we have AWS, Azure, GCP, etc., we can see an overview of everything, the status of everything here, also filter all the checks here, and the most important, go to the compliance section without having, you don't even need to have internet connection here, and see the different compliance frameworks that we support. As you can see, we support so many. Let's see, for example, CIS level 2. Okay, we can see here everything that we have to fix for CIS level 2. Like, hey, password policy is not set up, I have to do it, right? And everything else. So we have more than 35 compliance frameworks supported here. See, HIPAA, for example, FedRAMP, moderate, etc. So you can go step by step and section by section, looking at what you have to correct.
Now, you alluded to it earlier with, talking about SOC 2, but, the compliance stuff is obviously a big deal these days for the enterprise use case, and, that's something you've dived right into.
Yeah, exactly. So if you are a Prowler Cloud customer, you can go to the compliance section and go through the different schedule scans and see your posture regarding the different compliance frameworks that we support, like CIS, some of the well-architected framework for AWS, for example, HIPAA, etc.
Now, one other thing that we should talk about is the fact that this is kind of this is proper SaaS. It's actually multi-user, and you can delegate responsibility for different things to different people. Why don't you walk us through that part of it?
Yeah, for example, if you have a team with multiple people, you can invite users. See, you can invite users here, just sending an email and selecting a role, admin, operations, whatever other role. In this case, I can see the invitations. For example, I have invited a colleague, and you can see the details of the invitation. For example, you can send the link of that invitation to your colleague. So the way we have this setup is like every account or every provider that you add, like multiple accounts or whatever, you can add that to a group. See, you can manage different groups here based on different providers, based on different departments or areas like developers, etc. You can also create roles based on those groups. Like, well,
of course, because it's based on like IAM roles as well. Like, you can sort of control a bit of that on the cloud end as well, which is like, well, they got this role that's got access to these things, and then
Exactly.
That's going to show up as a different, you might have multiple AWS instances in Prowler, which is the, same account, just different roles. Yeah.
Exactly. So you can,
Yeah.
for example, let me show you here. This it has Azure operations. This thing is when you come here to roles, you can configure the role details and add all the different permissions and the visibility to the groups. See Azure operations. This is only to see Azure accounts. This is the way that you can assign not only view only, but also some sort of admin privileges. For example, you want to add only one person or a team to manage billing, or to add new accounts, but not to access the results of those accounts. Sometimes you can add some automation to just do the provisioning using our API, but nothing else, not to see the results.
Now, just one last question, Toni, which is what sort of the larger commercial providers are you sort of most closely sort of competing with here? Because it's a burgeoning space, right? Like, who are your competitors really, like, with all of this?
So considering that we are focused on cloud detections and remediations as a CSPM, let's say, as Gartner like us to say, we can compete with that section or that part for Wiz, Prisma Cloud, Lacework, and many others that they are doing detections. But of course, those platforms are doing also CNAP and ASPM and other type of functionalities. But when it comes to detections and remediations, I think we have the most comprehensive set of checks.
Well, and I'm guessing there's going to be a cost advantage too with Prowler, right? Given that it is based on open source and you've got this sort of, pay for hosting model.
Exactly. It's not only open source, but also community driven. We are adding and detecting new threats every day, adding new providers like Microsoft 365 that we are adding now, and growing that set of detections. At the same time, we are working on different technologies that allows you to mute and filter out what is not important for you based on regions, accounts, names, tags, etc.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of like what people did back in the day with like snort signatures and the whole community angle of people contributing. And I guess these days people are doing it with Corelight, with network stuff, but we haven't seen that for cloud yet. So I think that's a really worthwhile endeavor where people can just all contribute and, obviously you're going to QA those checks and make sure they're sensible, and you're just going to wind up with, as you already have, 1,000 checks that are going to be very useful. People can find Prowler at prowler.com, but we're going to wrap it up there. Toni De La Fuente, thank you so much for joining us to walk us through the Prowler platform. Great stuff.
Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for having me.